Okay, welcome everybody. We're just a couple minutes out here. I just want to start off by mentioning this is our 12th year doing this. And my name is Mike Wendell, by the way, in case you don't know me, the director here. We had Jason Clockey at the beginning of this January 18th with his Bricks, Butter, and Baldwin Electrics piece that he did. And then we had Kate Prattville-Rinn, Saturday, February 8th. She talked about her dad, Railroad's own Renaissance man. And then we are going to have next month, Saturday, April 19th, actually 12th, I should say, not the 19th, this is the 12th, at 2 p.m. Iowa passenger service in the 1950s and 60s. So, and that's going to be really interesting. That's Don L. Huffsummer. And we're at the point now where we're about ready to start with Eric Fogg, railroad historian, speaker. And he's going to talk about the Merci Train when it came to Iowa and what it all involves. And so we will get ready to start that now. I welcome Eric Fogg. And the Merci Train comes to Iowa.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for inviting me back to tell one of my favorite stories. I guess I should say to all of you, thank you for coming out on a Saturday afternoon as well. I'll warn you right now, thank you is something that a phrase you're going to hear a lot about today. In 2018, while on vacation, my wife and I stumbled on our first Merci car. We didn't know much about the Merci train, but were almost immediately intrigued by its story. We went home and started looking for the Iowa car. It wasn't hard to find. Its story was what was hard to find. Hopefully, you'll also see why we've come to love this story. It's all about gratitude and people doing things to help other people, which fits nicely with living in Iowa. Personally, I find it amazing that after 80 years, we're still talking about studying and finding new details and new stories about World War II. In late 1940, France and the United States literally exchanged trains of boxcars, each loaded with various donated items. All that work behind this unique effort was done by everyday citizens, not by governments. How and why our donations got to France and how and why French rail cars got here is all part of this story. Okay, in 1945, World War II was finally over. After 6 long years, the deadliest armed conflict in world history finally came to an end. As a result, Europe was left devastated. There was almost no place in Europe that hadn't seen death or destruction. Unemployment was high. Food shortages were widespread. U.S. Army troops deployed to Paris, one of whom was my father, would pay for French perfume or champagne not with US dollars or French francs. They had to pay with cartons of cigarettes, the only currency of the day. Enter the Marshall Plan. It was an American government plan, a $13.3 billion effort to help with Europe's recovery, the start of what we would come to call foreign aid. The US feared poverty would reinforce the appeal of communism and fascism. And without a European market for US goods, America's economy would also suffer. This program was very successful and helped Europe to quickly rebuild. During World War II, recycling drives were a way for everyone to contribute to the war effort. By recycling unwanted metal, for example, the government said it could use that to build ships and planes. Housewives saved bacon fat for use in making explosives. Think about that the next time you go to breakfast. The list was long for ways people could help. Now the war might be over, but Americans were still used to doing their part. Drew Pearson, probably the most famous newspaper columnist at this time, had a nationwide following, and he suggested a way Americans could contribute. His idea was called the American Friendship Train. Americans would be asked for donations, food, clothing, toys, and fuel to send to Europeans in need. I'm not sure what kind of fuel you'd want to send across the ocean, but that's what was asked for. The Friendship Train would start in Los Angeles, as it did on November 7th, 1947. Along the way, they'd pick up donations from other cities. I don't know what a carload of raisins would look like, but I bet that would have been interesting. If individuals wanted to contribute, they would just go down to the station on the day the train was in town. Many people even came from faraway cities wanting to do their part. In fact, eventually the train became two trains, a northern train and a southern train. Shouldn't be surprised that Iowans were involved. There were stops in Council Bluffs, right here in Boone, and someone just told me Boone loaded 5 boxcars full of things for this train. It also went to Ames, Cedar Rapids, and Clinton. So I'm going to guess that was on Chicago Northwestern tracks at the time. As you can see by the map there, the train went north Sacramento and then went east through Iowa and on to New York City. About half of that route was, of course, along the first transcontinental railroad. The goal, pretty ambitious, 80 train cars full of stuff for Europeans in need. It was very ambitious, in fact. At the time, American boxcars were about 40 feet long. So 80 of them would cover over 9 football fields long. That would be impressive. But you don't ever want to underestimate the American people. The result, 700 cars would stretch across 78 football fields. More importantly, the 700 cars were worth, by 2025 dollars, $587 million. Keep in mind, this was all from individuals. The gesture had an unplanned and powerful impact. The cars got to New York Harbor, were unloaded and sent across the Atlantic. Citizens of France, Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands received some of the aid. This crazy idea that Drew Pearson had, it really worked. Andrew Picard was an unknown, a French railway worker and a World War II veteran. He saw firsthand what America had done during and after the war. So he started a movement to send surplus French World War I era boxcars to the US. They would be filled with tokens of appreciation from the people of Europe, each packed with mementos from citizens of every age and class. Another crazy idea? Or maybe not. Donations came from over 6 million French and Italian citizens. If you think about it, they probably had very little for themselves, much less more they could share with other people. Picard's idea took hold, and the French people responded, just like the American Freedom Train. It quickly became known as the French Gratitude Train, or simply the Merci Train. Merci is French, is the French word, as you know, for thank you. That's the depth of my French pronunciation that you'll get today. I can't even tell you the French gratitude train in French, but you'll see it in a couple of these slides. The train's first trip, believe it or not, was on a ship, arriving February 3rd, 1949, when the French freighter SS Magellan steamed into New York Harbor. A cheering crowd of over 25,000 people was standing at the docks as the boat, shepherded by police launchers and a dozen smaller craft, passed the Statue of Liberty. That's when you know you're in America. Ship whistles blared, formations of new Air Force jet planes roared overhead, while fireboats sent towering streams of spray into the morning sunlight, boasted the New York Times. Aboard ship, 49 small French boxcars. Normal customs procedures were waived, and the precious cargo was unloaded duty-free. Let's talk a minute about those French boxcars. They were very common on French railways. They were built between 1872 and 1885. So by the time they got here in 1949, they were already pretty old, as you can tell. They were designed to hold grain and commodities, what we might call a boxcar. They were 29 feet long, 11 feet shorter than a 1945 US boxcar. Our cars, as you probably know, have a gauge of 4 feet, 8.5 inches. The French boxcars were 5-foot gauge, so they wouldn't run on American rails. This car, which is a model, is special. It has what American railroaders might call a doghouse. It's that structure on the right, slightly above the car itself. It provided a small space for the brakeman to have some protection from the elements. Most European freight trains didn't have a caboose, so this was a compromise of sorts. During both World Wars, these cars were used to transport food, ammunition, and soldiers to and from the battlefields of France. That must have been fun, because truly being boxcars, there were no toilets, no windows, and no seats. In World War I, each car was used to hold 40 soldiers or 8 horses. Now, the operative word there is or. They didn't combine the two. It was either 40 people or 8 horses. But how'd you like to be first in the car after the 8 horses had been there? I don't know. So Americans, being Americans, the American doughboys quickly nicknamed these cars 40 and 8s. If they look familiar, you've probably seen them before in newsreels and books on World War II. They were also used to move Allied soldiers to prisoner of war camps. Again, not a good experience. And sadly, they were also used as concentration camp transport during World War II. In 1949, the people of France sent literally a trainload of thank you gifts to the American people. It was an unparalleled gesture by everyday citizens. One car went to each of the 48 states. I think you're probably old enough to remember when we only had 48 states. Alaska and then Hawaii joined us in 1959. But in 1949, there was a 49th car. It was shared between Washington, D.C. and the territory of Hawaii. And we'll talk more about that later. Each car was loaded onto flat cars because, as I said, with a 5-foot gauge, you couldn't run them directly on American tracks. And they were sent across the country to each state. It took Iowa 10 days to get their car. Interesting enough, it's something that probably wouldn't happen today, the railroads didn't charge anything for delivering these cars around the country. On February 3rd, a ticker tape parade up Broadway that you see here welcomed the French boxcar filled with gifts for the people of New York State. The parade included a motorcade of 150 mounted New York City policemen, marching bands from the Army, Marine Corps, police and fire departments, French war veterans, French Boy Scouts, and French men and women in costume. Along the route, over 200,000 New Yorkers lined the sidewalks, including thousands of school children who had been given the day off, waving flags and tossing confetti. Among the many dignitaries in this parade was a guy we'll remember, Drew Pearson. He was the spark behind the American friendship train back in 1946. When he was interviewed that day, he said, probably a junk dealer wouldn't give you more than $20 for it, but this old car and the keepsakes inside it represent $1 million worth of sentiment. There was an estimated 52,000 total items, more than 1,000 gifts per each car. Donations were by ordinary, everyday citizens and included dolls, furniture, statues, clothes, decorative objects, and artwork. There were also gifts of great value: a Louis XV carriage, the first motorcycle ever built, 50 rare paintings, and the president of France personally donated 49 Cervas porcelain vases. Legend also has it that the first petroleum-powered automobile was also in one of the cars. Interestingly enough, no one's ever heard of it since. I imagine that it's sitting in somebody's private collection as we speak, but they're not talking. The cars were open to the public, and each state got to decide what to do with the gifts. As an example, on March 13, 6 young Connecticut women were chosen as finalists from among a group of 150 women who each hoped to be married in the satin wedding gown that came in the Connecticut Merci car. They were chosen because they had a 24-inch waist, which was the measurement for that dress, and no alterations were allowed. The woman who was the most perfect fit and who was engaged to be married in June, so there was some stipulation here about how you got the dress. You had to be this size, a perfect fit, and getting married in June, you'd get the dress for free. Yeah, the winner, Miss Connie E. Carino of New Haven. That's her getting measured right there in front of the newspaper cameras after the contest. She won. The runner-up is the young lady on the left, and the dress itself, more importantly, you can see that on the right. Looks like a pretty fancy wedding dress, well worth all the effort. Connie and John Farrell, the groom, also won many gifts from local merchants. They weren't the typical wedding gift of a toaster. They got a silver tea set, among other things, as well as a all expenses paid honeymoon in, of all places, Europe. So while they were on their honeymoon, They also had a chance to meet the dress designer, which means the whole process came full circle and should have been very interesting. The dress must have worked. Connie and John were married for 53 years. Wedding dresses came in several other cars, and as a man, I have to say, that's probably, in my thought, it's probably a good way to get rid of a wedding dress, but I can't see a lot of women parting with their wedding dress, but they were in the Merci cars, so it must work. Each state had a reception waiting for their boxcar. And several states sent theirs on tour so people could see the car and its content. And even when it was empty, a lot of them still displayed the car for people to see it. So your first question now might be, where are they now? Remember that 49th car that we talked about? The one that was shared between DC and Hawaii? This is it. This is outside of the Washington train station with both French and American veterans in attendance, and you can see them in the lower left-hand side, American and French veterans. But there's also Boy Scouts, politicians, dignitaries, and even the French ambassador. Look at the photo closely at the center. The white-haired man leaning into the car is the French ambassador. I don't know why he's leaning into the car, but maybe to touch it or to pin a medal on it, or because he's French, maybe just kiss it on both cheeks. I don't know, but he's getting his 15 minutes of fame, that's for sure. Why they sent this car is just another good story. The residents of the territory of Hawaii, not yet a state, contributed 2 boxcars of sugar to the Friendship Train's relief goods that went to France in 1947. And 34 Lions Clubs in DC and Maryland raised money to purchase 30 tons of flour for the same Friendship Train. Both very large gifts. Obviously, the French did not forget that. That's why they came up with this car. And there it is. So how do you think the French saw this arrangement working? 6 months for each location? They were 5,000 miles apart. There's no record that I could find of the discussions that must have ensued, but there also aren't any official reports on how the gifts were split. But rumor has it that, are you ready for this? Washington kept all the gifts while Hawaii got the empty car. Sounds about right for how things still work in Washington, doesn't it? Eventually, we're told, Hawaii did get some of the gifts. There are 43 cars still in existence. Obviously, this is not one. We don't even know whose this is, but you can guess, maybe. Of the cars that no longer exist, Colorado, when you look up Colorado, it says that it's been missing since 1954. I'm sorry, but how do you misplace a 29-foot long, brightly painted rail car? It can't be stuck in the back of your closet, obviously. It's beyond me. Massachusetts' car was scrapped. Our friends in Nebraska sent their car to a playground in Lincoln. I guess that was a nice touch. And later sold it as junk and got $45 for it, which was $25 more than Drew Pearson thought they'd get, if you remember his quote from earlier. Illinois, this is great. They asked numerous groups and no one wanted it. So they set it on fire and destroyed it. New Jersey sources indicated it was destroyed. I think the cars that were destroyed were mostly destroyed by fire. A lot of them were at veterans meeting places. And I'm thinking there were probably barbecues involved. I don't know, but the record doesn't say exactly how the fire started. And Connecticut was destroyed by fire during the 1950s. It was parked by a veterans group meeting place. So maybe that's a good example. You remember Connecticut? They had the big wedding dress contest. That was in 49. And by the 50s, the car had been burned down. Finally, Iowa's car came home where it belonged. It arrived in Clinton on February 13th, 1949. The Davenport Democrat reported it was met by thousands of cheering citizens as it crossed the Mississippi River into the state. Like the Friendship train, it was probably traveling on Chicago Northwestern tracks. A Miss Natalie Waters was selected from a group of French women now living in Iowa to be named Miss Iowa Merci. That is Natalie in the picture on the lower left. And she's all dressed up, as you can see, and she's holding something in her hand. She used that to christen the car by breaking a bag of shelled corn over it. After all, this is Iowa, okay? From there, the car went on to Des Moines for the official welcoming ceremony. My preliminary research with the Des Moines Register hasn't been able to find many details, but I think we can assume that there was a gala party here in Iowa when the Iowa car arrived. So then your next question might be, the Iowa Merci car, what happened to it? Who's taking care of it? Where is it? Can I visit it? This is the earliest photo that I can find of the car. I also can't find who owns it. The state of Iowa, of course, but repeated phone calls and emails, and I still can't find anyone who claims responsibility for it. I've often said to the few people I've talked to on the phone, if the car would catch fire, who would they call? And no one can seem to answer that for me. But I'm still trying. Question there?
A car like that north of Cedar Falls.
It's it. You're jumping ahead unless you want to finish. Oh no, it's I'm still trying to find out who owns the car, and it's not owned by Cedar Falls. In 1920, World War I veterans formed national and local 40 and 8 societies. I'm not going to do the French at the bottom. You can do that. Over the years, they took on causes like child welfare, nurses training, and youth sports groups. So they were a very charity-minded group. By 1949, many of these veterans groups added the care of the Merci cars to their agenda. And think about it, who knew better about these cars than these guys? They saw the cars as memorials to Americans who fought to preserve freedom. The car was to go in Waterloo to a proposed all-veterans park, which wanted to also honor the 5 Sullivan brothers, another World War II Iowa story, and an interesting one if you're not familiar with that one. The Black Hawk County 40 and 8 Veterans Group asked the state for permission to maintain the car. Very nice of them. The Veterans Park was never built, so our boxcar sat for many years at the club's headquarters on the southwest edge of town. Next, it was moved to the Military Reserve Center for restoration by volunteers and was even included in Black Hawk County's bicentennial celebration parade in 1976. So where would you think this car should be displayed so all Iowans could see it and get to know this fabulous story? Well, let's look at where some sister cars are now. Arizona's car, my first Merci car, lives in the McCormick-Stillman Railroad Park, a special 30-acre site in the heart of Scottsdale. Under a stout roof, plexiglass coverings over the open doors allow you to see inside. All the gifts are displayed in a separate brick building with lots of information and notes. The park itself has a variety of shops, museums, playgrounds, play areas, all with a railroad theme. My wife and I have been Merci cars ever since we visited the park. And by the way, don't miss this on your next trip to Scottsdale. It's worth the trip. If you like trains, you'll like this park. How about a smaller venue, say near a prominent Iowa Railroad station, and there are a number? The Utah car is on display outdoors at the Ogden Union Station, an impressive station in and of itself. It's also close to where the first transcontinental railroad was completed. Want a place where lots of Iowans can see it almost anytime? Maybe on the grounds of Terrace Hill, the governor's mansion, or how about on the grounds of the state capitol? Even better, how about the state fairgrounds? I was born and raised in Missouri, but I only just got to see this car this December. It's on the state fairgrounds. It's well protected with the gifts displayed at a nearby county courthouse. It's also close to the historic railhead used for those famous cattle drives of the 1870s. A lot of history there. Wisconsin doesn't maybe treat their cars nicely as you'd expect. It's stuck inside a museum, tucked into a corner, as you can see. Of course, at the end of the car, you can see those plywood panels that will be shortly removed when the National Railroad Museum expands to almost twice its size. And the little boxcar will have a much improved location in Green Bay. Could you think of some place like that in Iowa? A railroad-themed place, centrally located, with access of major highways, and that regularly draws large crowds. Wonder if someplace comes to mind. I know it comes to my mind, but think about it, maybe so. How about Cedar Falls, which has already been mentioned? Would be a good location. UNI is there with lots of cultural attractions. And there's the Dome. And there's a college there, a great place. In 1977, Antique Acres, self-described as a vintage farm machinery display site and public campground, agreed to keep the boxcar for the club. Actually, it's on display north of Cedar Falls. And as you drive by, you can see it from the road if you know where to look. Remember when we talked about cars with a doghouse to protect railroad workers? You'll notice that the Iowa car has a doghouse. The photo on the left shows a couple of steps and a rickety railing to help a quick-on-your-feet brakeman get to the shelter. As a brakeman myself, I'd have some reservations about mounting that car. But it's nice someone at least thought about us brakemen, that's for certain. I believe our Merci car is one of only 2 or maybe 3 Merci cars that has a doghouse. So that continues to make Iowa even more special. True, the car has become a museum. It's become a museum of sorts. A number of original donated objects are still displayed inside the car. The car is locked. If you went there today, you couldn't get in, but there are things inside of it of museum quality. Think about what you might have donated to the Merci Train. Here are just some of the things that were in the car. Upper left is a jewelry box. Doesn't look like there's any jewelry in it, but they sent the jewelry box. In the middle there are what all I can call is creative clothespin sculptures. And I think those are supposed to be French sailors, but somebody went to a lot of trouble to create clothespin sailors. There's an oil painting on the upper right by a guy named Picasso. No, I'm sorry. I didn't get there. It's an oil painting, but I don't think it's by Picasso. And a large Catholic rosary said to have come from Lourdes, the famous Catholic pilgrimage site. The car also contains some World War I photos and uniforms from the Korean War. These were added by the current caretakers. The car was given to the state, so you would have expected that the Iowa State Historical Society in Des Moines also has some of the gifts, between 100 and 150 gifts. You remember that just doing the math, there were about 1,000 gifts in every car. So they split it up with a number of people, which was also the plan. On the right are a series of children's dolls. It would be brave of children to give up their dolls to be put in the train, but they're children's dolls. Then there's a sculpture of French sailors, very nicely done. I can't help but point out to you the large caliber artillery shell next to them, and I can't explain why. I don't think it has anything to do with the sailors, but it's an interesting thing to display. And a collection of military medals. Legend has it, a French veteran donated a medal given to him by Napoleon, but we don't know which one it is. Here are additional items held by the state. It looks like artwork was a popular gift. I was especially intrigued by the colored photo in the upper left. A French young girl is so very pleased at the lighted Statue of Liberty, and Churchill and Uncle Sam, and I'm not sure who that other guy is, but Churchill and Uncle Sam are joining with her in celebrating that. Again, these are gifts from the French people. So there's a calendar from 1949, sheet music. I don't know why. The postcards, the 3 postcards you see there, and there's many postcards like this, same artist, but the postcards are most touching is the word I think I would use. On the far left, the little girls are planting flowers on the graves of French war dead. And in most of these postcards, the children are in tatters, or as poor as church mice. Many times they're bandaged legs and arms and feet, as if they might have suffered damage in the war. The postcard in the middle with a little boy pointing, he's saying in French, and I had someone translate this for me, he's saying, they are over there. He's speaking to the French soldiers you can see in the background, who are obviously on patrol. And in my thoughts, he's telling them the Germans are over there. They're over there. So that's what he's doing. There's also a thank you note in English from a lady who lived in Paris, thanking America for what they'd done. I asked the State Historical Society, these are from their website, and you can find them, not easily, but you can find them on the State Historical website. And I asked them, because of the topic for today, if we could borrow some of these for today's presentation. And I was told it would need approval by 2 different committees who would have lots of questions, and the answer would be no. So you'll have to take these pictures or at least the only chance we get to see them. And I have not heard of the State Historical Society displaying these. I know that you could ask to make an appointment to ask to see them. And at a certain date and time, they would get them out and show you some of the things they have, but they're not generally available or sitting out in any display cases. Voiture 82, and voiture is car or light carriage in France. Again, my French is very limited. But this is how the 40 and 8 clubs identified themselves. So this is saying this is car 82, 40 and 8 of Black Hawk County. This local group of veterans has protected the car since it came to Eastern Iowa. And they're responsible for handling the display space outside Cedar Falls. Constantly maintaining a 150-year-old wooden rail car can't be easy. They've built a roof for protection. And if you see other Merci cars, many of them are under roof. The feeling seems to be that if they keep the sides open, we can still see it, but the roof will protect it from snowy days like this week. And the wooden railing system, very complicated wooden railing system, makes the car handicap accessible. As you recall, the state was allowed to give away items from the car. And Iowa seems to have done just that with some of the things. We don't know how many exactly. Over the years, the 40 and 8 have tracked down at least 24 Merci gifts and convinced the new owners to return them. I didn't ask how they did that, but a bunch of veterans showing up on your doorstep would be pretty effective. The Grimm family, Father Junior and son Richard, you see Richard here, were both Navy veterans and 40 and 8 members. They've been custodians of the car for many years. When Junior passed away in 2017, the job went to Rick, who was 70 at that time. He said he was one of the club's youngest members and that they still had about 20 people in the group in 2017. It still belongs to the state, as far as I'm concerned, Grimm said. It's a gift to the people. I just happen to be its custodian. Richard Grimm passed away in 2023. I don't know if a replacement has been named, and nobody I've talked to can tell me if that is indeed the case. When we're done here today, if you'd like to hang around for a few minutes, we have a very short video of Richard speaking about the car. It's obvious he and his club took their responsibility very, very seriously. Much credit goes to the 40 and 8, and as a veteran myself, I thank them for their hard work. But I do have some concerns. What's missing from the Iowa car in this photo? The heralds of the 40 historic provinces of France are visible on all the other cars, almost all the other cars you see at the website, but not on the Iowa car. And they add so much to the feeling of the car, as well as, I think, the history. When I first saw this car 5 years ago, the photo top left, I was told the heralds were the club's top priority project. You can see their mounting brackets there on the side of the car. And that's Richard Grimm, who gave us a tour of the car there on the right. His goal, he says, was to, quote, try and get this back to looking like what it looked like when it was delivered to the state of Iowa in 1949, end quote. That included replacing the now stored shields of the French provinces to the sides of the boxcar. On the left is a photo taken January of this year. And it's also, you can't see it from here, but there's the blow up to the right of to the left of the car is just part of an old, hard to read sign that explains about the car. And again, there's no shields shown on either side of the car. In defense of the club, the campground is not secured, and theft or vandalism could be a very good reason that we don't see the shields. I also found there's a group of people who travel to see the cars on a pretty regular basis. It's like a club, and I can see why they're interested. Each car is different, and each story is different too. Michigan is red. I've not seen any other red cars, Merci cars. In investigating why it's red, I never got an answer, but I think what happened is either the car caught fire and the wood part of it burned, or the wood got so old it just fell off, and they were left with the steel skeleton that you see here, and they rebuilt the car. They put back made their own version of the car and have the shields on it as well. But I guess they couldn't find any 5-foot gauge trucks to put under it, and so it just sits by itself. The car on the right, it belongs to Tennessee, and it's riding on tractor trailer tires, which makes me curious as well. I'll have to check on that. We haven't joined the club yet, but we hope to see Georgia, this Tennessee car, then this Michigan car, and Indiana yet this summer. I'll warn you right now, Merci cars and their stories can be contagious. Have I gotten you interested in the Merci Train fleet of cars by now? Like everything else, there's a website for that, mercytrain.org. It's pretty informative. Some of the stories are on there, some are not. Some leave you with more questions than they do answers, but it's interesting to see what people have done and where these cars are. Equally interesting is if you dig down on the website, there's a listing for every car, all 49, and including the ones that were lost, stolen, misplaced, like Colorado. We're still looking for it, but misplaced in Colorado, or the ones that were set on fire or whatever. It can be a good afternoon's reading. It's kind of fun. Pick your favorite state and look it up and see their story. As you can also tell from this page on the website, there are periodic updates. Iowa hasn't been updated since 2017. That's when the elder Mr. Grimm died. So there's been nothing updated since then. But our friends in Kansas updated things in 2023, California in 2024. Oregon in 2024. So it's interesting to follow. And this is not a strictly organized collection or recounting. It's this club, this group of people who are big, big fans of the Merci cars. Getting back to how all this started, it's not about governments or countries. It's all about gratitude, being thankful. I feel very lucky living in Iowa, where people are quick to say thank you, and they're almost as quick to ask, how can I help you? It's the Iowa way. And it's something, helping each other, saying thank you, that we could use a lot more of these days, I think. I appreciate you being here today, to listening to this story, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. So all that's really left to say is not thank you, but merci.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zoom people. Appreciate it.